Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. If you've been paying attention to recent events, the sci-fi future we were sold as kids in movies like Toy Soldiers and Terminator is closer to reality than ever. This is driven not only by huge leaps in technology and AI, sensors, and the miniaturization of batteries and other electrical components, but by a growing awareness of just how awful war is. We are now bombarded by pictures of death and destruction. It's very hard to romanticize these things when we see so much craziness. I mean, in the old days, no one used to know what was happening overseas during a war. Even in World War II, all people at home really saw were these very neat newsreels at movie theaters, and these were edited oftentimes with oversight from the military. That or you just waited for the nightly news briefing on the radio or for the evening edition of the newspaper that came out every day. But then again, you're not seeing the horrifying effects that machine gun rounds or explosives have on human flesh. Back then, you're not made aware of the casualty numbers until much later after battles, and that's sort of how things usually went with war. Leaders understood that civilians couldn't properly understand what was going on the battlefield, and they generally censored a lot of this information and kept the public blind. I think the war that really changed public opinion and created a large and very permanent anti-war protest movement was probably Vietnam. And that's because for the first time you're seeing high-quality, hand-shot color footage emerging from the battlefield, and yes, there were a lot less restrictions on what photogs could film or shoot while they were out there. Some units were just in the jungle, and you had photographers embedded with those units. They could basically shoot anything they wanted. Suddenly, folks at home were seeing stuff they've never seen before, like death and destruction firsthand, naked kids running in horror from a napalm attack, South Vietnamese officers executing Viet Cong in the streets. And it hasn't really stopped ever since then. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan failed not only because of a lack of planning or clear, concise goals of what these operations were supposed to achieve, but also because Americans were sick and tired of seeing their young men and women get blown up and killed, and they were also tired of seeing Afghans and Iraqis get killed in the tens of thousands just because of our presence there. And now in the age of social media, we literally have combatants bringing GoPros into battle so that we can see them assault trench lines. You have individuals who are filming a grenade drop from a DJI drone into a tank. And despite what commenters are saying about audiences becoming desensitized to death, I believe a lot of people are becoming desensitized, but I also think the opposite is happening as well. More and more people are realizing just how disgusting and terrible war is, and therefore less and less people are signing up for military service, especially in the developed world, especially in countries that don't really have a political need right now to have a strong military. Like in Taiwan and Ukraine, where they kind of do. And this is what I think will ultimately lead to more and more military forces around the world adopting essentially droids on the battlefield, automated units that can kill without anyone watching over their shoulders. And so today I thought we'd learn a little bit more about where our military technology is heading by taking a look at some of the deadliest droids in the Star Wars galaxy. We're going to start off this video with one of my favorite mechanical killing machines in the Star Wars galaxy. And unfortunately, unlike many things in Mandalorian lore, this machine has not yet been fully recanonized by Filoni and crew. I do think this will happen eventually because honestly, it's too awesome of a vehicle of a war droid to not include in the live action, and I don't think any fan would actually be angry if they brought this back. It's a win-win situation. You see, the Mandalorians in the old days used to go on these epic crusades, which weren't driven by political or religious beliefs, well, kind of religious beliefs, I guess, but by the Mandalorians' overwhelming desire to test themselves in battle and prove to the galaxy that they were better than everyone else at killing things. Every now and then, the Mandalorians would actually stumble across a very worthy opponent that not only resist the Mandalorian onslaught, but were able to even win some victories. This didn't usually happen, but when it did, the Mandalorians usually came home, they licked their wounds, and they really thought hard about why they lost, and they tried to absorb and learn as much as possible from the species that were able to defeat them. And that's exactly what happened when Mandalorians encountered a lizard-like species known as the Basilisks. And the Mandalorians would eventually destroy the Basilisks and basically enslave their entire populace. As a matter of fact, they tortured them so badly that within a few generations, the Basilisks lost their sentience and just became giant lizards that are no longer sentient. It's pretty terrifying. Now, the Basilisks had these powerful war droids that were semi-sentient, but could also be ridden by a rider. Think of them as mounts more than just war droids. The Mandalorians would learn how to make and ride these incredibly powerful machines, which proved to be invaluable in the aggressive offensive onslaughts they usually partook in. Basilisks, like Mandalorian armor, were equipped with a wide range of weapons, ranging from laser cannons to missile launchers. They were also heavily armored as well, but due to their small size, they were really hard to hit. These droids basically gave every Mandalorian Crusader the same amount of firepower as a gunship, which of course is ridiculous, but very, very Mandalorian. In the midst of the Clone Wars, senators from both sides of the conflict, Padme Amidala from the Republic and Senator Mina Bonteri from the Separatist Alliance, secretly back-channeled to spearhead a peace initiative that would end the brutal civil war that had engulfed the galaxy. This, of course, went against everything that Darth Sidious wanted, and so he phoned his buddy and apprentice Darth Tyrannus and told him to, derail the peace talks by carrying out a terrorist attacks. Sounds kind of familiar. But yeah, Darth Tyrannus sends these things in, which seem just like ordinary sweeper droids or some type of droid that buffs our floors. But hidden beneath its shell is actually an infiltrator demolition droid. It's lightly armed with laser cannons, but it doesn't really need that much firepower. You're not going to be attacking fortified positions with these droids. You're going to be guiding right past the guards at the front door using your disguise. Those lasers are for silencing any personnel once you get inside of the facility you're trying to infiltrate. And those personnel aren't going to be very well armed at all. And once these droids get into position, they detonate a bomb hidden inside of their chassis. And that's exactly what happens in the middle of Padme and Bonteri's attempt to start a peace dialogue. These demolition droids knock out most of the power to Coruscant. And it's not a deadly attack, except for maybe the poor workers in the control room. But it does affect the planet. I mean, it turns off the power for most people on Coruscant, including much of the voting populace. And so support for continuing the war remains high. During the Skywalker saga, the deadliest droid in the galaxy that was wide produced was probably the IG series made by Holowan Labs. Holowan Laboratories mainly provided security droids for Outer Rim corporations that would start the secessionist movement that would lead to the Clone Wars. The IG series was a premium combat droid, far more expensive and capable than the usual garbage made by Bactoid Combat Automata. The IG series could be custom outfitted to perform a wide range of duties. The Intergalactic Banking Clan famously fielded a large army of IG Lancer bots who rode speeders into battle and engaged the enemy in heroic frontal charges. You also have the IG-100 Magna Guard variants, which were especially trained IG droids utilized by General Grievous and Dooku as bodyguards. General Grievous actually taught his Magna Guards how to use the 7 forms of lightsaber combat, which is why they were so efficient at fighting the Jedi. IG series droids were also commonly deployed for contract work that could be extremely expensive if a living bounty hunter was used in its place. These IG series droids were generally considered assassin bots. One unit known as IG-12 actually was destroyed in the line of duty and then was repurposed to be a nurse droid, but then also reverted back to murder and then became a mech suit for a smaller murderer. Then there's IG-88B, who's probably one of the most well-known IG series droids in Star Wars. He basically goes on a murdering rampage the second he was activated, and he kills his creators. IG-88 would become an independent bounty hunter and compete with some of the best in the industry, like Bossk and Boba Fett. All IG series droids had excellent sensors that gave them almost a complete 360-degree field of view, and they also were heavily armed and armored. The droid brains were extremely complex and allowed them to engage multiple opponents using multiple limbs while moving rapidly, a feat we see IG-11 pull off quite well during the skirmish on Nevarro. Not all B-1 battle droids were completely useless. I mean, the standard ones most definitely were. This was a feat of mass manufacturing and cost savings after all. But there is one B-1 battle droid that should strike fear into the heart of its enemies. We of course will talk about Mr. Bones. Mr. Bones looks technically like a B-1 battle droid, and at his core, that is exactly what he is. But ever since his owner, Temmin Wexley, started building him, Mr. Bones has basically had every part and component on his body replaced with either armor or some type of advanced weapon system. Combine that with some advanced training protocols that, Temmin Wexley fed into Mr. Bones' head, and this is one of the most dangerous melee droids you'll see in Star Wars. Apparently, the young rebel programmed various combat protocols into the droid along with the movement style of General Grievous, along with motion cap footage of Twi'lek Lale dancers. And so, Mr. Bones doesn't just kill and massacre things, he does it with a sense of grace that you could say is kind of artistic. The The Mandalorian series is basically a series paid by the Beskar industry to show just how durable Beskar is. Din Djarin gets punched, shot, eaten, blown up more times than perhaps any character we've seen in the Star Wars galaxy, and that mainly is thanks to his people's armor. But there is one situation when Din Djarin's armor almost failed, or at least that was the sense I got, and that's when he was fighting the Dark Troopers. Originally, the Dark Troopers came from the Dark Forces video game with Kyle Katarn. They were a really powerful replacement program for the standard shock trooper, stormtrooper, and there were like a lot of different variants based on which phase of the program we're talking about. You had like cyborg clones, you had mech suits with living beings inside of them, and then you had full-on droids as well. In canon, the third generation of Dark Troopers used by Moff Gideon's Imperial Remnant were created after it was realized that having a human in a powered armored suit was just a weakness and an unnecessary redundancy, especially if you could replace a droid brain into the helmet instead. These Dark Troopers, as Din Djarin would find out, were extremely heat and blaster resistant. It was almost impossible to kill them. But I guess he is kind of lucky that these droids didn't get a Beskar or Fyric inlay on their armor. That would have made them completely impossible to destroy. If you ask the clone trooper which droid he hated encountering the most in the Clone Wars, some might say it's the IG series. But there are so few in numbers that they're kind of inconsequential. Most clones just didn't see them. Others might say it's the B-2 super battle droids or even the more feared BX droid commandos. Yes, these units can prove to be a challenge to take down, but it could be done, especially if your unit is well coordinated. Now, you see, the unit that the clones hated more than anything was actually the feared Droideka from Colicoid Creation Ness. These insectoid weapons designers really hit the jackpot with their creation. The Droideka essentially was a support weapons droid. It had two very high fire rate twin blaster cannons equipped on its arms, and it could quickly roll into battle and be deployed within seconds. But what really made this droid such a headache for enemy personnel was the fact that it was equipped with the Personal Deflector Shield, a rarity in Star Wars. These shields were powerful enough to stop almost every type of small arms and even explosives. The only way you could defeat a Droideka was by slowly bypassing the shield, either with your weapon or some kind of explosive. This could prove to be difficult when the Droideka has your entire unit pinned down with a withering stream of blaster fire. When a clone trooper encountered Droidekas without time to prepare or distance to retreat, the situation always ended poorly for the clones. Heck, even the Jedi struggled with these things. Now, if the clone troopers hated the Droidekas the most, then clone sailors, or basically any type of spacer who flew during the Clone Wars, hated the buzz droids the most. Also created by Colicoid Creations Ness. Good job, guys, at creating terrible things. These tiny droids were designed primarily for sabotage. They were about the size of a basketball and enclosed in a thin shell that would protect them while they're being launched into space, either in canister munitions or just individually. Once live, these droids will latch onto the nearest metal target they can find and start taking it apart with an assortment of plasma torches, circular saws, drills, and other type of power tools you wouldn't want someone on the hull of your ship to have. These buzz droids were almost impossible to stop once they made contact with your ship, and to make matters worse, the Separatists didn't really deploy them with friend versus foe identifiers. And because these buzz droids were basically passive munitions, kind of like landmines, there are plenty of hyperspace lanes and approaches to the planets that were just lined with these things, and they're all active. They were just waiting for someone stupid enough to fly in that direction, or unlucky enough. L337 is probably one of the most hated characters in the Solo movie. Her activism and droid liberation speeches were a bit tiring, especially for people who are looking to escape the real world and all the real events that were going on at the time. Probably. But L337 is actually quite a dangerous individual within the Star Wars lore. First of all, she's a hybrid droid. Her brain originally came from R3 series astromech. Astromechs, as you probably know, have some of the most potent computer brains in the galaxy because they oftentimes needed to make extremely complex mathematical calculations for hyperspace travel. She also had the programming of an espionage droid, and she had the processors of a protocol droid. Her lack of memory wipes is also clear, and that's most likely why she got into activism in the first place. The point is, L337 is a very advanced droid, and she has a lot of computing power. And L337 does make a good point about droid rights. I mean, droids in the Star Wars galaxy are treated like property and servants, yet they're extremely capable, intelligent, and in many worlds they actually outnumber their organic counterparts, so why should they serve organics? The only thing the droids are missing is a leader, really, someone who can inspire other droids to throw off their shackles and resist oppression. And that's exactly what happens in the Pike Syndicate-run spice mine on Kessel. In that case, L337 was a hero because those droids she freed also freed enslaved organics, which we all agree is morally wrong. But what if L337 did the same thing she did here on Coruscant. You know, suddenly you have robo-taxis refusing to transport people, security droids refusing to keep the peace, you know, maintenance droids refusing to maintain all of the systems from the weather to the electrical system. It would be a complete nightmare, and people would probably die on Coruscant if this happened. And so whoever threw that detonator and blew up L337 probably saved the organics in the galaxy from a pretty existential threat. The HK series was sort of like the IG series of the Old Republic era, and HK-47 is sort of like the IG-88B, as in he's the most famous and loudest of his kind. The HK-47 would famously serve alongside the former Jedi and Dark Lord of the Sith, Revan. Actually, before his master's memory was wiped and he was defeated by the Jedi, HK-47 would run around doing Revan's dirty errands, basically, you know, assassinating people that Revan believed was standing against his cause. HK-47 is unique in the fact that he truly seemed to enjoy killing organics, who he lovingly called meatbags. That kind of reminds me of Mr. Bones, actually. And despite his destructive tendencies, HK-47 was perhaps the most loyal member of Revan's crew. After Revan disappeared into the unknown region searching for the hidden Sith Empire, HK-47 was one of the last official members of his crew that would continue searching for him. For generations, Star Wars fans have fallen in love with C-3PO and R2-D2, the protocol droid and his astromech friend. Fans have a million opinions on every character in Star Wars, but only the Star Wars droids are universally loved. And so, I would love to introduce to you guys the evil doppelgangers of these two beloved droids, 000 and BT-1. These two droids might look similar to C-3PO and R2-D2, but internally they are two sick puppies. 000 looks like a protocol droid, but he was actually designed by the Tarkin Initiative as an advanced torture droid. 000 was extremely intelligent and terrific at extracting information from uncooperative individuals. He probably had a very intimate knowledge of most species anatomy, so you know, he knew which buttons to push or which limbs to pull off. Then you have BT-1, who was an assassin droid who used his astromech appearance for infiltration, and he used his barrel-like body to store just about every type of weapon and munition you could think of. This was definitely a very deadly pair. Well, there you have it, guys. 10 of the deadliest droids in the Star Wars galaxy. Let me know in the comment section below if I've missed one of your favorites that should be on this list. Also, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time, guys.